flag or see you
Right.
see some areas that need to be covered, okay?
You got it. You got it
All
right here.
right,
Let's do it.
we're there.
I'm going to mute everybody. I'm going to start the recording.
All right, good morning, and we'd like to welcome you to a press conference here with the city of Pontiac. We are here. My name, by the way, is Mark S. Lee, and I will be helping to facilitate and to moderate this press conference. We appreciate you joining us. This is regarding the city of Pontiac moving forward on medical marijuana. We'll be discussing new resources, collaboration to bring new timelines for program realization, and the economic impact as the city reemerges post-COVID-19. And at the May 5th Pontiac City Council meeting, new budget amendments and resolutions were passed that will bring new resources to the city clerk's office for reinvigorating the medical marijuana facility application process. We're going to take the next few minutes and go through some of the details. Now, before we get started, just a few ground rules here as we do it. I will be obviously introducing the speakers for the press conference, number one. This will also be made available via several links that will be sent out from Don Tanner. And Don and his team, Don is from Tanner Friedman, will be sending out the link to those of you unable to attend the press conference. We'll send you the link so you can certainly get back accurate information. We are also going to certainly ask you if you have questions. You can do it two ways. You can either put a question in the chat room or send me a message privately, right? Let me back up. We can have you put the message in to me privately is what I'm trying to say. Send me a message privately to Mark Lee, send it to me privately, or just unmute your microphone and say who you are, and please go ahead and ask the question. All right, so that's what we're going to be doing for the next few minutes. All right, so again, we'd like to welcome you to the City of Pontiac, the Medical Marijuana Press Conference, and I am very pleased at this point to introduce the mayor of the great city of Pontiac, the Honorable Deidre Waterman, and she will provide you with an overview of what's been happening over the last several months and weeks, and what's happened most recently at the press conference at the recent city council meeting as well. Mayor Waterman, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you for all of you who are here for this press conference this morning. And I want to thank the panel here who are here to give you the information and to answer the questions many of you have been asking, as well as to explain what are the next steps we think should happen. And in accordance with the May 1st deadline that was set by the city clerk to begin reviewing the applications that have been received by the city of Pontiac, some as early as last summer, and certainly the provisioning applications that were due at the end of January. We will be introducing some of the staff and the panelists who are here to give you that information. We had also expected the clerk to be here yesterday evening. He indicated that he would not be present for this, and I did write him and say that we were sorry, but he could not be present, and he chose to change his mind about this, that we wanted to have him speak for himself in terms of the application process. As we know from the ordinance and the referendum that was passed by the voters, the clerk's office is primarily responsible for the process guiding through the applications. As I stand now here as the second-term mayor of the proud and historic city of Pontiac, I want you to know that Pontiac is a changed city from the one that suffered many years of financial crisis under an emergency manager. And now, 6 years later, it is a city that has cleaned up and strengthened its neighborhoods and is committed to a blight-free program that will be completed this year. We have also attracted new businesses and industry, including the high-tech sector, and we now have become known as an emerging high-tech hub. We have also enhanced our historic downtown, which is unique in Oakland County. We have brought enhancements to our school district, which has made numerous strides in educating the children of Pontiac. We are also attracting and bringing in new residents who like our historic and beautiful neighborhoods. At this time, we have 38 new building projects underway, as well as Amazon, which has completed its first distribution station at the old Silverdome site and will be bringing in the fulfillment center in August of next year. These are things that emanate a changed Pontiac, and we're happy for that narrative. In addition, now we have medical marijuana. This was an initiative that was brought to the ballot in August of 2018 by unknown authors, but it did pass by, after a recount, one vote. From the beginning, this process has been mired in some controversy. After the initiative did pass only by one vote, we saw that there was a recount effort brought by citizen Billy Swayzer, as well as funded by Reverend Douglas Jones. The recount showed that although it passed by one vote, after the recount, it was seen that a number of the districts could not have their absentee votes recounted, and also some of the absentee voter ballots could not be recounted because they had not been properly sealed and so were not accepted for recount by the canvassers. Anyway, we proceeded, and you will hear from our city planner later in this presentation the many steps that have been taken for the city to come to this point, including the number of moratoriums, I think 6 altogether, as well as the many reversions and revisions of the ordinances and the overlay districts within the city of Pontiac to start this process. The reason for today's press conference, as I said, and the town hall which follows, which is open to the general public, including all our elected officials. The interim clerk presentation will be covered in part, although we can't speak for him, by other officials who are here today, although he needs to be here to answer the next steps in the process that was due to begin on May the 1st. There were 3 principles from the beginning by which we wanted the medical marijuana to be implemented in the city of Pontiac, and that we have outlined many times during this process. Number 1, we wanted medical marijuana to be brought to City Pontiac with transparency and integrity. And to that end, we had over 40 what we call working group sessions that anybody who was interested in the medical marijuana could come and could hear presentations such as you're going to hear today from our planner, from our building and safety, from all the entities of city government that were to be involved in this process. That included the city clerk, as well as all the other elected officials who were invited to come. The second principle, that we wanted to make sure that we were observing the will of the voters. And universally, if people couldn't agree on anything else, what they did agree was they did not want the facilities brought to their neighborhoods. And I think as the ordinances have been carried out and the plan laid out, particularly with the overlay districts, that has been accomplished in the plan that is before us. And number 3, as part of the will of the voters, we wanted to make sure that we maximize that has been accomplished, economic development potential and the community benefits. And number 3, as part of the will of the voters, to that extent, that was the reason for the overlay districts, including the downtown, to be able to concentrate the economic power of medical marijuana and what it to bring to the city in those districts that most needed it in the city of Pontiac. So with that, I'm going to introduce now our city planner, Vern Gustafsson, who will talk to you about the steps along the way and how we got to the state where we are right now. He was originally, by the clerk's flow chart, ruled out of being part of the medical marijuana process, although that was something that was decreed by the ordinance. So he has been restored to that part of the review process according to the latest flow chart. And he is now going to tell us the many steps we took, the myriad 6 moratoriums to get to the state, and how that set the infrastructure for moving forward as we hope to follow the will of the voters and also adhere to the many investors who've come to Pontiac and are waiting to hear what the next steps are. So with that, I would like to introduce you to Vern Gustafsson. Would you take the floor and describe that process, Vern?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for the introduction. I will be spending a few minutes here to explain kind of the current status and the review process as it relates to medical marijuana applications, and I'll give also a brief history in regards to ordinance that the mayor had previously discussed also. The review of medical marijuana applications would receive a medical marijuana license. That whole process will be starting. Like we indicated, the interim city clerk will not be able to attend, but he is the one that kind of controls this process, will provide that clarity and transparency to the applicants, and also direct the review team, which includes myself and a number of others that I'll explain. And as you know, his office did receive and will continue to receive applications and review, and then also approve these medical marijuana licensing. Following a number of months, roughly about 7 months, there was much deliberation and many delays that culminated in regards to the application process and how that would work. This week, however, council did approve the budget and also consultant agreements with select consultants that the interim city clerk had requested, and that would be part of a team that would be, besides the consultants, would also review, city staff will review the applications. The applications will be reviewed based upon the required detailed information, and also reviewed based upon 4 objectives that the mayor kind of indicated in regards to economic development, community development, social justice, and also protecting residential neighborhoods. And that's similar to what our objectives and goals were for the medical marijuana ordinance that was established here in the community. And that created that whole process, took approximately, after the confirmation or the certification of vote in September of 2018, we went through a relatively lengthy process of 14 months of going through 6 moratoriums, 7 ordinances, and 7 amendments to reflect what is important and what is needed to preserve and protect our community, but to allow those uses to blend in with the community in select areas. As the way we had done in regards to ordinance was to create various overlay districts, one being in the downtown, which represents the area within the loop, meaning Wide Track or Woodward Avenue, whatever you want to call it. And then there's sections of Cesar Chavez, Walton Boulevard, and also the remaining areas of the city. We did receive a total of 108 applications that will be reviewed. 103 were related to medical marijuana provisioning centers, which are scored and ranked, receiving up to 130 points. We received those applications within the required days in January, from January 6th to the 27th, which was that window of time. The way the ordinance reads, there are 20 licensing that can be obtained in the city, 5 within the downtown area, 5 along sections of Cesar Chavez, Walton Boulevard, and also the remaining areas of the city within certain select zoning areas. And then we also received a number of non-provisioning applications, meaning like growers and processors, safety compliance, and secure transporters in areas throughout the city. There is, according to the ordinance, there's no limit or there's no cap on the number of those type of facilities to come within the city. We know and we understand that this is an industry that will have a significant and positive impact on the city and continue our economic revival of this great city. To discuss more as relates to the economic impact, I would like to introduce Matt Gibb. Matt, I'd like to turn it over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vern. As always, my screen says I'm muted by the host, but I'm hoping that I'm not.
No, you're good, Matt. You're good.
Thanks. So following my Zoom instructions, apologize for the hesitation. Thank you for the opportunity. The role that the mayor has asked myself and others to play in this particular issue of medical marijuana licensing is to drive the economic impact that this really means for the city. Last night I was speaking with Vern Gustafsson. Lauren is in from Chicago. He is an investment partner with a firm in Pontiac called Pike Street. And they do a significant amount of activity in the downtown area particularly. And Lauren said something that was really spot on to the analysis of the economic impact, that 2 years ago, all of the tremendous growth and drive and excitement around investing in the downtown area and within the neighborhoods of the city of Pontiac came to a screeching halt. And it's been in a screeching halt for 2 years. Vern just outlined the planning process and the multiple moratoriums and the multiple ordinance demands and the multiple changes that were requested. All of those things resulted in this, in the situation that you have an investor saying, we were on a roll, particularly in the downtown, and it came to a screeching halt. And so I want to show you just very quickly, what that really means from an economic impact analysis and walk you through very, very quickly of what we're talking about. So the analysis of the economic impact. If you have an empty storefront in your downtown, these numbers are derived from a gentleman named Donovan Ripkema. Donovan is one of the leading experts in Main Street development across the country. If you have a small 1,500 square foot storefront or 2,000 square foot storefront in your downtown, what does it mean when it sits vacant? Well, it means upwards of $800,000 in lost sales volume, and that means sales tax revenues and $25,000 in lost rent to the property owner. It means lost property tax revenues. It means $51,000 or more in lost loan demand. I mean, if you look at this list, and this will be available as part of the press packet as well, you can see to start to add up the economic impact of just having a lost, an empty storefront that's a lost opportunity. What does that mean for medical marijuana? Well, right now, just in the downtown area, not in the immediate downtown, but in the downtown district, there's 29 properties that are vacant, waiting for renovation and waiting for decisions on the cannabis license. So when a gentleman like Vern Gustafsson and his expertise says we came to a screeching halt, 29 properties are suffering those significant impacts. 103 applications mean that there's 103 properties, 108 total when you get to the other aspects of medical marijuana. What could that possibly mean? Well, it means a huge impact. It means that just in the downtown, we're losing estimated 22,000 plus new visitors per month. Can you imagine the walking economic dynamic to the restaurants, to the banks, to the other businesses that are within the core commercial district of downtown Pontiac? And so important, delaying or lost $87 million in new development, missing 153,000 plus in city property tax revenue. And this is the big one. 2.8 million in potential taxes. There's huge numbers that are sitting fallow right now for the city of Pontiac. And as we go along without decisions and without driving this, what does that mean in the citywide? Well, we've done our estimates extrapolating what those 29 vacant properties mean, what the impact of medical marijuana and the actual employment and the revenues that would be generated out of those centers on a citywide basis based upon the total maximum. Right now, the city's missing out on $261 million in development. 210 people, it's estimated, are unemployed because of the delays. These are not just significant figures, but they're catastrophic figures because they blend with the impact that's happening right now with the COVID-19 crisis as well. It's about to be announced today nationally that unemployment will exceed 16%. We're going to move within 2 months from under 4% national unemployment to over 16% unemployment. We as people that are love and are proud of Pontiac recognize Pontiac will get likely hit the hardest within this region. And so the delays that have been caused for all this time that Mr. Gustafsson has said are now having this type of an impact going forward. So what does all of that mean? You know, I on behalf of the mayor, we have been working as an administration to really drive this to be in a position where everything can move forward. And as Mr. Gustafsson said, there's been some delays inherent just because of questions of the referendum and the ordinance really direct that internal services would do reviews, but for some reason that was objected to. We've worked through those challenges. The administration and the mayor have been extremely proactive in the last 60 days to drive everything that would need to get solved to move this matter forward. And so I don't want to speak on behalf of the clerk. I've got great respect for the clerk. He has a big election process, but this is an extremely important matter that has to get commenced. It was indicated that it would start on May 1st. On May 5th of this week, the city council approved the hiring and retention for the clerk's office to assist in this process, special legal counsel that would guide the advising over the scoring process. They approved hiring of a firm, Giffords Webster, to assist Mr. Gustafsson's office in making sure that all the planning and scoring was done correctly and timely. They approved an attorney from the Grewal Law Firm to act as the hearing officer in the event that there would be appeals as these decisions are being made. All of that counsel was all approved on Tuesday night. Those agreements have been reviewed by the city attorney. The city attorney has directed in the ordinary and required course of business that insurance provisions and other things just need to be submitted and checked. All of that is ready to be put forward. We've given the tools necessary from internal resources for clerical materials and filing and those types of things. And so from the mayor's office, you know, I would implore that that we all recognize the economic impact that this has caused and will continue to cause. And I'll close my remarks with this and certainly be available for any questions from the press. You know, what does it really mean from a real estate standpoint? I mean, the real estate standpoint is this, is of those 29 properties in the downtown and 103 properties that are now under real estate option across the city, people are paying thousands of dollars every month to property owners to hold those properties, to keep them vacant. They don't meet any of the numbers that I was talking about. Well, those options now were expected when they submitted a license application to know by now. And here we are in the midst of the COVID-19 with real estate valuations fluctuating greatly. Nobody knows what to do. And so what happens if all of a sudden those property owners decide, you know what, I don't believe the city can do this. I don't believe that the clerk's office can do this, even though all the tools have been given to do it. What if they decide to back out of those options? It means an additional layer of additional economic impact because you'll have a churn of real estate that is really in the most critical time. When you have uncertainty and lack of decisive leadership, people don't invest. And that's what we're in right now. We have property owners that are scared that they won't be able to move their properties. We have applicants who are scared that they're going to lose their options. And all the tools are there, but we haven't started. And so we will continue to push as an administration to get this started immediately. The goal would be 90 days, that we would start this immediately. And within 90 days, we would have a result of the scoring and the process, understanding that there would be some appeals, but to give certainty into this process. So we will be doing that. We'll talk more in the town hall meeting with the public after that. And I think, Mark, in the absence of the clerk, I would just tender this back to you as the moderator.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that, and appreciate the update. What we like to do is to turn over to Tony Chubb for the city attorney report. Also talk about next steps. But before we do that, real quick, just to remind you, questions will start at 10:30. This is being recorded, this press conference, and a link will be sent to you upon completion of this. Thirdly, a town hall will be starting at 11 o'clock. We would encourage you to participate and certainly be engaged with that as well. So again, questions will start at 10:30. At this point, what I'd like to do is to turn over to Tony Chubb, the city attorney, for his city attorney report. Tony?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark. So the mayor wanted me to speak on where we're at right now is legally within the process. And that really kind of goes back to what she noted were the key objectives at the very beginning of this, which were transparency and integrity as we move forward with reviewing the applications. And so that really started, again, going back to once this was adopted by the voters, we saw that it was very decisive, being won by only one vote. And so we immediately started convening working groups to see what the concerns were for those that had voted no and that had voted yes. And so that was keeping everything away from the residents and the residencies in the city. And so that began with the planning ordinance. And the planning ordinance provides clarity and transparency for all the applicants involved as to where they can place these facilities and submit applications. And so we did that in such a way that we placed them in areas that have adequate infrastructure and to ensure safety for the residents and for any of the patrons of those businesses. And we also put them on thoroughfares that allow for adequate traffic flow so that the businesses wouldn't overwhelm the current city roads. And the second step was, after that was in place, we had to start working on the application process and the application. We developed a very comprehensive application that provides very clear guidelines for all of the applicants to ensure that everyone's on a equal footing when they put in those applications. And so with that, we believe that everyone is going to be, we have 108 applications that are going to be decided on a 130-point scale. And rightfully, those applicants are going to want to know that we understand and we can legitimize the difference between a 129-point and a 130-point score, which may very well determine whether they obtain an application or not. And so with all of those applications in place and all the processes in place, our goal is to minimize the appeals that Mr. Gibb referenced so that we can expedite the actual implementation of the successful vendors. And so it's our hope that, as Mr. Gibb said, that will be minimized so this 90-day window can be realistically put forward. Thanks.
Okay, Tony, thank you very much. So at this point, what we like to do is, please, if you have a question, please unmute your microphone, for lack of a better phrase, or audio, say who you are, and direct your question accordingly to those individuals that you'd like to ask to answer the question for you. I just want to restate one more time that this is being recorded. A link will be going out from Don Tanner with Tanner Friedman if you want to get a chance to review the comments for accuracy and things of that sort. We would encourage you to do that. The town hall, which will be open to the public, starts at 11 o'clock via a different Zoom link. We would encourage you to participate as part of that conversation as well. All right, so any questions, please join in. And what I like to do is to ask a couple questions to get us going here. The review process itself and the applications, who's going to actually review the applications as part of the overall process?
I can start off, Mark, providing a little bit of an overview in regards to that. Like I mentioned, that the City Council did approve agreements with some consultants that would provide legal, financial, and also planning assistance. But also, there is a number of city staff that will be involved, including myself, building official, city engineer, and also the fire department would also be providing initial review of the applications based upon the required information that was submitted. As you know, as Tony referenced, the applications are quite detailed in regards to what was required to be provided. So we have our own required amount of agenda or questions that we have to review as response to the information that was provided.
I
Okay.
can add to that as well.
Thanks.
And yes, thank you, Mr. Gustafsson, for saying what is the current process that has been worked out. Of course, over the time of this period since the referendum was passed, the clerk, who, as we've stated, is in control of that process and designing it, has had many different changes in that over time. And at one time, he wanted to bring in experts to replace all of the city departments, including the planning and the building and safety department, which by the ordinance were required to be present for this planning review process in order to determine content sufficiency of the applications. So as you've heard, we have had a number of staff, most recently Matthew Gibb, as well as our finance director, who have been working intensely with Mr. Doyle, the interim city clerk, on my behalf to make sure that we had a process that not only met the ordinance, but also that was going to be meet the budget. You know, at one time, some of the experts and all the additional help had brought in would have driven the budget for this $250,000 over what had originally been intended by the mandate from this ordinance. So there were many things that were changed during that time. We thought with the work and the negotiations that gone on, and the date had been established to start the review process May 1st, only to come to this council meeting Tuesday, May 5th, and find yet 3 other budget amendments in addition to those that had already been proposed to that were going to delay the process once again. So that was our concern, and that's why we stuck with the date of having this press conference today, so that we could alert people to what the situation was, despite our best attempts to bring everything to conclusion. Now, the contracts that were approved as submitted by the city clerk to the council meeting on Tuesday were, of course, have to be reviewed by the city attorney to make sure that they're proper as to form, and then by the charter, the mayor has to sign all the contracts. So these were reviewed by the city attorney after they were passed Tuesday evening by the council. They were brought to me yesterday evening, kind of late in the evening, and I have executed those and I have signed those, the 2 of them that were delivered to me and approved by the city attorney. There is one that the city attorney is requiring a certificate of insurance, as is usual and customary for this kind of business, and we're waiting for the clerk to obtain that from the entities. Once that is done, I will also sign that. But we're ready to go. You've heard about all the preparation we've done, all the effort we have put in to getting to this stage, and we hope that the city clerk, who hearing this, will also abide by his responsibility to get this process going for all the reasons that we have stated from the presentation this morning.
Okay. If there are any questions, please unmute yourself and jump in and identify whom you're with, and feel free to ask the question as well. Another question that comes to mind is what is the scoring process? How will the determination be made with respect to these dispensaries?
Mr. Chubb, would you like to answer that?
Sure, I'm happy to answer that. So the scoring process was set forth within the ordinance as adopted by the voters. It, in the end, is at the discretion of the clerk, which is why it's important that he's engaged as we move forward here. And it's set out in a 130-point scale that sets forth requirements for content and sufficiency, as well as outreach to the community. It requires them to have proper financial resources so that we can ensure they'll be able to sustain themselves and be an ongoing and beneficial corporate citizen in the city. And then it also requires certain things such as philanthropic endeavors, and that's really their community benefit agreement. By coming into the community, the ordinance intends that they also give back to our community and again, be a responsible corporate citizen. And so that's going to be a really important part, and it's been a source of great interest of potential applicants. And so the mayor's issued a lot of information as to what she believes will be important community benefits that would benefit our city the most. And so we're hopeful that the applicants will follow her lead and that the clerk will score accordingly. And obviously, then there's the nuts and bolts that they have to comply with. And so a large part of it is ensuring they have a proper security system and that they meet all of the codes of the city, that they meet all the planning requirements as set forth by Mr. Gustafsson, and that they meet fire code, for example. And so those all kind of weigh into the 130 points. It's all detailed in the application. And so it's our assumption that all of the applicants will respond thoroughly to each of those scoring criteria.
I would like to invite John Hewitt from WWJ News Radio 950 in Detroit to ask a question. John, you can unmute I think you're muted there, John. There you go. John? Okay. I think he's probably having a little technical difficulty. So let's talk about the conflicts of interest in terms of anybody, the city council or the mayor, sign any type of agreement, regarding conflicts of interest.
Yes, I can speak with that, and the Attorney Chubb can add to that if he wishes. As I said, for me, as with anything within the city, integrity and the way the process is carried out is of high importance, of ultimate importance. And to this matter, the city attorney did draft a conflict of interest statement, and I signed it. I required every member of the Planning Commission to sign it, which they did. And the interim clerk drafted his own conflict of interest statement, and he signed that. And we did have one council person who signed it and one other council person who said that they would sign it. So that is how we had introduced that conflict of interest into the process here to institute integrity. And Mr. Chubb can relate to the fact of the need for that conflict of interest and how that also emphasized the things that were in our charter about ethical behavior of the elected and appointed officials.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so as the mayor has said, we are going to absolutely ensure that this process is done with integrity and transparency. And the first part of that is ensuring that nobody that's involved in the process, be it approving zoning ordinance amendments, reviewing the applications, or issuing the applications, has any financial or other proprietary interest or relationship with any of the businesses that are going to develop, any of the business owners that are, or applicants, that is. And so that's what the disclosure agreements that we drafted, and as the mayor noted, she signed, as well as Councilwoman Petola from District 3 also signed, go toward that. Additionally, though, the charter is clear that if a city council person has a financial interest in a transaction, they do have to divulge that with particularity to the city attorney. And I presume that they will follow with those obligations.
Again, questions from the media, please jump in. Please identify yourself and ask your question, if at all possible. Okay. Let's hone in on, if I could, briefly about the interim city clerk. How long has he been in a position in office, and how was he selected to fill the interim role?
The interim city clerk was, by the charter, the clerk is selected by the city council. And that was the case. He had not been in the clerk's office prior to this. He had been the Deputy Director of Economic Development. About 5 minutes before our meeting, he came to me and told me that the City Council was going to appoint him at that meeting as the interim city clerk. And the reason he is interim is because by our city charter and our job description of the city, the clerk is required to have some background in handling elections and having the responsibilities of the clerk's office, as well as some time of duty serving in the clerk's office. And until the interim clerk obtains that level of qualification, then he is not by the charter allowed to become the active clerk. I think he is pursuing educational and on-the-job training, as well as other orientation to achieve that certification. But and Deputy Mayor may be able to help. But I think by the charter and by the job description, he's required to have at least 5 years, I think, in order to be the active clerk of a city such as Pontiac. Responsibilities of the clerk's office has.
Okay, I have a question here from WWJ text to me. So let me just read it to you. In a broad brush sense, how has the COVID shutdown impacted the application process? What new resources will be made available? So those two questions. So the first question, one more time, is in a broad sense, how has the COVID shutdown impacted the application process, and what new resources will be made available in light of what's going on?
The COVID-19 crisis, of course, has impacted all of our lives. And that has been the first and primary concern because it affects health and the health and safety and welfare of the entire community. And that's the primary responsibility of the mayor and thereby of all of the city employees and staff. And we are doing that. And we've met with that in a number of ways. We have complied with all of the mandates and executive orders, both from the state and local governments. We have sought to assist our citizens in making sure that they had adequate food supplies. We do have a number of entities that have stepped up to help with that. And we've done all the things as working remotely to make sure that the essential city services have continued uninterrupted, and that transition has been fairly smooth for the city of Pontiac. We're happy for that, and I thank all of the employees and staff who have worked diligently to do that. And I also thank all the first responders and essential workers throughout the city who have worked to deliver healthcare and other resources to our citizens and our businesses.
Okay.
So to that extent, we're moving forward now. In terms of the application process is ongoing, and the application process had opened early last year and continues on. The applications for dispensaries had to be submitted within a 21-day period, and that 21-day period ended January 27th earlier this year. So in terms of the dispensary applications, that process of application had already started. It's just the application had already ended and had been completed. And 20, up to 20 will be selected from that pool, as we said. It's just that the process for reviewing those applications had been delayed. And that is what we're trying to help and assist the interim clerk make sure that it gets started, because that process will still take a while, as you've heard, to review those applications. And that's the 90-day window that Mr. Gibb has been trying to work with the interim clerk on to make sure that we get those applications, which have been held in the clerk's office for 3 months, will now get reviewed.
Okay, Tony, I would think this question is for you, Tony. In terms of, there are 3 different law firms involved in the process described by the overall procedures by the clerk's office. So with 3 law firms, what happens in terms of selection if the 3 firms don't agree? What kind of walk us through that process and how that might be resolved?
Sure, I appreciate that. So each of the law firms that are referenced have separate and distinct roles within the process. So the first law firm is Kirk, Huth, Lang, and Beldamenti, and we're mainly working with Robert Huth in that firm. And their objective or role in the process is to, after the review of the planner and the clerk, they will, and the chief and the financial advisor, they will review their reviews to ensure that everything is consistent. So we provide a layer of protection there. And the next firm would be the Graywall firm. And the role that they're going to provide is that if a applicant is dissatisfied with the outcome of their review, under the ordinance, they are entitled to a review in front of a hearing officer. And that's what the Graywall firm will be doing. They'll be acting as the hearing officer. And so they'll look at all of the application materials and anything submitted by the applicant and make a recommendation that the scoring be upheld or be changed back to the clerk. It's the clerk's ultimate determination whether he does agree with the hearing officer or not. And then the final step is if people are still dissatisfied and they take legal action against the clerk of the city, then my firm, Gianmarco Mullins and Horton, primarily myself and my partner, John Clark, will be defending the position of the city.
Okay. Mayor, I do want to ask, in terms of, there was a recount, I believe, back in August of 2018. Can you address why there was a recount with respect to the referendum? And then we'll focus briefly on the future. Mayor?
There was a recount, and that happened after the August ballot and referendum. I think it was actually done by the canvassers in September. I'd have to check that record, but we do have a report that our city attorneys did retain an expert, Mr. Eric Drost, to prepare a report because initially we were told that it had passed by one vote. That was so close that, as I said, there were several citizens who brought a recount as was their right to do so. And as the canvassers reviewed the ballots, they realized it had passed by more than that, but they couldn't count all the ballots. So I think the reason it was asked for was because the vote was so close, and that's why they within the right to ask for a recount as is allowed by the state law. So that's why it was done.
Again, other questions, please just jump right in. We'll wrap up in a few moments. I want to indicate that the town hall will start at 11 o'clock. This session is, in fact, being recorded as well. And Don Tanner, this press conference is being recorded. Don Tanner from Tanner Friedman will be sending out a link to this press conference so that you can review it for accuracy and things of the sort. As we think about the future, I do have a couple more brief questions. Matt, maybe you're the one that's responsible for this question, if not the appropriate person. Just for level of specificity, when do you anticipate the first dispensary to be ready to have a final approval and maybe be open for business in the city of Pontiac?
Well, likely it's a good question, Mark, and it gets asked quite a bit as well. If we start, when will we know? I mean, that's the big question, right? For consistency's sake, the applications will have to be reviewed in a way that they're defendable and that everyone gets the same fair shot. And so the 90-day time frame that we're talking about, it's likely that towards the conclusion of that is when the city would be in a position to start making decisions and recommending awards of licensing. So if we say at the end of that 90-day period, we would know which applicants have prevailed within that process, we can expect another 6 months of permitting and construction activity. And this becomes the follow-up that would involve building and safety and planning that, beyond the scoring in the application process. So you can expect that the whole process from start to finish at a minimum would take about 9 months before we would start to see the first potential open doors of something. Could it move quicker than that? Yeah, it can move quicker than that. Would it take longer than that? Yeah, it can take longer than that. But that would
to add to that. Yeah. I would like to add to that. Thank you, Matt. Add to that we have continuously made available all the resources of my staff. I think Matt, since he's been here, about a third of his time has been spent for moving this medical marijuana process along by my assignment. So all the resources are available. We are putting everything to get this process going, everything that the mayor's office can do. And as I said, we are limited somewhat by the ordinance that specifies that the clerk has to be in control of that. So we are trying to augment and aid him. And I think my letter to him that evening and reinforce that again, because of so much that is at stake, so many opportunities that are being delayed for the city of Pontiac. And I think in the space for all of that consideration, and for our citizens that carry out their will of the voters, that we move this process along for the good of everybody. And that's what we hope will happen. And that's what we came to answer questions about in this press conference.
Yeah. And for the earlier applicants, what is the wait time for them? I mean, they've been waiting and waiting. So from a timing standpoint, what is the wait time for them to either get approval or an alternative means of proceeding?
Well, that's the interim clerk that, okay, that, as I said, he controls that process. As I said, we're giving him all the resources. When we, at previous, few weeks ago, he said that he would plan to review them about 20 applications a month. We thought that that was kind of a long time. That would mean the last application for even dispensaries wouldn't even be reviewed for 6 months. So that's why we're trying to put all these resources to help him to aid this process so that can move on a little faster. And to that extent, we put together all of the resources, all the consultants, as we said. Some new ones were added on as a council meeting Tuesday, and those are the contracts I have signed last night.
Has anyone asked for the money back as we begin to wrap up? Has anybody, any of the applicants asked for a refund, Mayor?
There has been at least one, and there have been others who have sent other letters of demanding to know where the process is. And we hope by having this press conference and the subsequent town hall that we have been able to be forthright and tell them where we are on that. And we hope the interim clerk will respond in kind at his early convenience.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Any closing comments from you, Mayor, regarding this process before we let everyone go and get ready for the town hall, which will be upcoming? Now, these are the links here where you can view this press conference. They will be certainly across the city's social media sites, from the Facebook page to the YouTube channel as well. So please make note of this. And again, Don Tanner will be sending out a copy of the press conference. But before we wrap up, Mayor, any closing comments from you as well?
I just appreciate all of you who have an interest and concern and are noticing the changes in Pontiac. This is a wonderful city with automotive heritage, but also proud of the narrative change about Pontiac. I invite you to come and see this change after we are lifted a little bit from this COVID-19 sheltering in place. I hope everyone will stay well, stay healthy. And with that, I would like to sign off. Thank you so much, Mark Lee and Don Tanner, for moderating this and for all of you who've been part of this change in Pontiac.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you all for participating. Again, there's a separate link for the 11 o'clock town hall. It's open to the entire city, to the public at large. We will hope that you will continue to log back in if you're with the media. Will be interesting conversations here. So thank you all very much, and we will see you in a few minutes at 11 o'clock this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.